like to, probably the first couple of things that I would like to say is that unfortunately, what we know didn't work, and this was under the old code as well as under RG165, was this whole thing of handovers where there may be multiple parties involved to the complaint. And under the old code, for those who were part of the old code, it was at the customer's option to go from stage 1 to stage 2. Now, as you know from the new code, that's all gone. ASIC and RG271 talk about this multi-tiered approach as well. It's a bit disappointing to see that the way that companies have adopted RG271, where there's multiple parties involved, AFSL holders, to say that, well, you can handle the complaint for that first 10 days or 15 days. If it's unresolved, then we'll take it over. And part of the next conversation over the next half an hour or so will be around some of the issues associated with that. And indeed, those who've heard me talk before will know that I'm a big advocate for, as long as the parties know what they're going to do, what are the issues, way before the customer makes any complaint, then from a customer perspective, you really should have them dealing with one person only, rather than having all these warm handovers, etc., etc. From a customer-centric perspective, it just doesn't work, and customers will fall out of the complaints because I think it's too hard. I'll give you just a quick personal experience of mine for those who know who've been following my journey, which actually ended up quite nicely as far as the bank was concerned. I had cause to make a complaint with the bank. IDR people are wonderful. It finally took this wonderful person within the bank's IDR team to really be a voice and hear what I was trying to say and actually resolve the complaint for me. Funny enough, after that complaint all got solved, it went on for about 4 weeks, whatever, they sent me a survey, okay? How easy was it? It was the toughest thing ever. Funny enough, they met every single technical thing possible, tick, tick, tick. From a customer engagement experience, it was awful. And when they said, is there anything that you would like to add? I said, I don't think your system will comply with RG271. And that was all I said. I haven't heard back from them. So, but what looks good on paper, you need to be a customer. So take yourself outside of your own company and be a customer and test what you've put in place. And don't tell the people that you're not who you are. So kind of come up with for one of my customers once, I actually purchased an insurance policy so I could play the role of a customer. It's an eye-opening experience, and then you start to understand of everything that sounded really good on paper and complies technically with RG271. It's not a great customer experience, and that's the number one takeaway. What ASIC is saying here, RG271 must be designed from a customer-centric. So your IDR must be designed from a customer-centric perspective. As Tatiana said, it all starts with your people. It's pointless if you have this beautiful pipeline in place if nothing goes down it. And it's your people who are your voice, eyes, and ears of the organization. And if you spend time with them to understand what a complaint is, because as ASIC says, a customer doesn't have to use the word complaint. Indeed, in my experience, I've never heard a customer say, a complaint. Our culture is we don't like to cause a fuss. So 99% of us are not the angry people that we see on TV. We're quiet, we're humble. We just know people are trying to do a job. And our way of making a complaint is very weird and it's strange because we kind of skip around the issue a fair bit. So you need to train your people at the front line that don't expect someone to all the time be angry about something, because invariably they aren't angry. They've got something that's happened that they want to resolve. So you do need to spend a bit of time with your people to actually train them to identify what a complaint is, and that's case studies, case studies, case studies, case studies, pause, case studies, case studies, case studies.
And specific case studies, I guess. That's the most powerful one, specific to your business and your part in the value chain. Being a broker, a supplier, an insurer, a TPA, an underwriting agency, they need to be very specific.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then once they've identified a complaint, know what to do with it. Because once someone from your team or an authorized representative, once they receive a complaint, that's day one. It doesn't matter that what phase or stages you've got in place. As soon as someone, whether it be an employee or an authorized rep, receives a complaint, or a service supplier receives a complaint, that's day one. So if they don't know what to do, know how on for a period of time, that starts eating into your 30 days. At that point of time, ASIC talks about having a triage period so you can identify the complex complaints from day one and don't make them go down the same pathway as everyone else. And ASIC specifically talks about the vulnerable customer. And as we know in part 9 of the code, we've got a whole part dedicated to customers experiencing vulnerability. This is where those first 2 days are critical. Don't forget, from a customer's perspective, you've done something that has upset them. You've got a great chance for them still to be an advocate for you by being by allowing their voice to be heard, treating them with kindness and with empathy. And it's that first 2 days which is critical. And you can't see this as a process because we're not people who fit well within a process. Your process needs to work behind the scenes and make it easy. You can't put your actual process over customers. You do need to confirm how many times have you sent off an email to someone and you're waiting for a response, and eventually you convince yourself, maybe my email didn't go through, maybe it got blocked or whatever. ASIC talks about an RG271 is confirming receipt, acknowledging that we've got your complaint. It'd be great because don't forget under the code and you've got obligations under part 11 of the code to tell the customer what the complaint process is about. But even if you don't do that, even if you barely acknowledge to the customer that we've got your complaint, thank you, and we'll be in contact with you within 48 hours, 24 hours. Something back so they know, oh, good, right, I don't have to worry about this, it's been received, and they're going to contact me back. It's about managing customers' expectations. For those who, and I think everyone in the insurance industry has got some form of obligations under the code, the new code. And as you'll know, if you are a distributor for an insurer or a service supplier, which is the claims for an insurer, you've got 2 days to tell them about a complaint under the code. And given that the code covers the end-to-end insurance, it's pretty much that most complaints would also be a complaint under the code. So again, you've got 2 days. Now, it seems to me, now I'm not the most intelligent person, maybe I could have achieved a lot more in a 37-year period, and maybe it's taken me too long to get where I am. But it seems to me that that 2-day period could be the time, given that ASIC says that it'd be useful to triage the more complex complaints. Isn't that 2-day period the perfect time to do that? And it's also the perfect time, which I'll be talking about soon, of agreeing who should manage the complaint without having any of this handover stuff coming into play. But I'll just park that for a moment. One of the big changes, it's the maximum complaint times has reduced from 45 days to 30 days. And don't forget, in ASIC's words, that time frame does not start when it goes to a person that you've defined as the IDR person. No, it's when, from an independent perspective, that the complaint has been received by the organisation, so the AFSL holder. Given that an authorised rep is a representative of the AFSL holder, that's day one. So it doesn't matter who picks her, whoever the customer talks to, that's day one. And if that doesn't change, so there's no such period of, you've got an amnesty period of 5 days. It's just rubbish. It's 30 days, and day one starts when that first complaint is made to someone who's acting on behalf. And don't forget, even under the code, a service supplier, and don't forget, under claims handling and settling laws, it specifically says claim insurance fulfillment providers, so that's all your claims, builders, etc. They are the agent of the insurer. Therefore, it follows if they get a complaint, that's now day one. So,
and even if it's a verbal something while you're attending the site or anything, or on the phone with that, it counts. That's exactly when it starts.
Exactly. For those, part of my time that I spent at at Suncorp was involved with some of the AFCA complaints. And the first thing that AFCA asks the customer for is a timeline of events. So even before they contact the insurer, they've got from the customer, day one, I spoke to the home builder on this date. AFCA now say, well, that's day one. Why did it take 55 days for your complaint to get resolved? And I may, AFCA, if that's how this insurance firm treats all of their complaints, that's a matter I'm going to tell ASIC, because your IDR system is not fulfilling your AFSL requirements. So AVCA asks for the time frame, and AVCA will report a systemic issue to ASIC. And then ASIC will come in and say, explain how your IDR system works and how, when you got multiple players in the chain, you work out when day one is. And it's going to be a lot tougher because there's multiple people who are authorized reps or service suppliers who have cell holders, and now you've got 30 days. Data. We saw the first cut of RG271 where ASIC had all the data fields in there. Everyone went up in arms, way too hard for us. ASIC said, okay, I hear what you're saying, but it's coming. So the data stuff is coming. Even now under RG271, ASIC expects you to collect a certain amount of data, and within the next 6 months or whatever, there'll be even more. I'll use the word onerous somewhat carefully, but more onerous data capturing obligations upon you. So you need to be thinking about that and get a copy, if you don't have already, a copy of ASIC's data dictionary that they've put out. You need to understand where IDR is going.
We can share this at the end of the webinar. We can share all the useful information.
Thanks, Tatiana. So we might now just cover off the actual checklist. So you've done all the hard work. Depending the size of your company, you may have had someone who's a specialist at change, kind of manage the whole process for you. And I can guarantee you that technically it will look beautiful. I can also guarantee you it probably won't work. But anyway, how many times you come across that? It looks great on paper. We open it up, first day on 5th of October, and up comes the bug. So if you're not testing it now, so use the next, I can't believe it's almost October,
2 weeks.
But use the next few weeks to test. And don't get the people who build it to test it. That's an inherent conflict. They will have an unconscious bias there. So get someone independent from the team, so it still can be with your organization, to actually test it pretty hard from a customer experience perspective. So did we want
if
to
I may add one point. So the purpose of this depiction of things, Paul is saying it's not a process, it's not a process. Well, it's very much a process in the eyes of the regulator. And I think how companies used to handle a complaint before, they handled it as a record, which you could keep in an Excel spreadsheet and kind of say, I got it, this is my resolution, it's happening. This table actually shows you it's way more than a record. It's a timeline process with requirements to record and do certain things. And even if they're not covered in the ASIC data dictionary, you have to keep the records, for example, that the complainant actually agreed to your resolution. Can't you say, okay, I suggested this and done, closed. What if they didn't agree, right? You don't want to hear from AFCA the next time. You actually want to hear from them if they're happy with your resolution. So whilst I wouldn't focus too much on the process, to me, it's like a hygiene factor. You do need to think it through. And then, as Paul says, move on and test it and see if it's actually working. So Paul, I'm sure a lot of people on the call actually did quite a bit of homework already and implemented a lot of changes. Can you maybe walk us through the kind of practicalities of, what else is there to do?
Look, it's a good, thank you for that, Tatiana. It's just on your, just to cover off that, because you've made a very, very good point. When I say ignore the actual process, of course you can't. Indeed, one of my favorite books that's just arrived is my Mate Your Own Ship. It's your ship. And one of the big takeaways, I think it's probably the best example from a compliance perspective of empowering your team. And what I say is that culture is the heart, mind, and soul of your organization, and policies and document and systems is the actual skeleton and skin of your organization. You can't have one without the other. You can't have a great culture without the documented evidence to show that. So, and the other thing that your policies and your system does, it provides a safe environment for your people to operate inside of. And given the onerous penalties for non-compliance, you need to create that safe environment. So that's what documents does for you. It's what process does. You want everyone to be doing the same thing every single time. That's the game. That's the number one thing from a compliance perspective. But it's pointless without culture, but also without having, process systems, guidelines. Just by itself, again, you need both. You need culture and process. So speaking of the checklist, so there's a few things that you should need to be going through now. As I said, I've already talked about, testing, doing it from a customer testing perspective. And this is what I meant. How easy is it for someone to navigate? And don't forget, you understand your customers the best, and you know the different cohorts. You've done all your target market determinations, etc. For instance, if you've got a large percentage of or a portion of your customers from a non-English speaking background, would they be able to find out how to use your IDR system, i.e. complaints easily? Someone who's hearing impaired, would they be able to know how to use it? So ASIC's very clear around this point. It cannot be a one-size-fits-all complaint. Your IDR system, and when I talk system, it's everything. It's people, it's process, it's technology. It must be easy to access for all customers. So don't have this one-size-fits-all when you've done your target market determinations and you've got multi-segments of customers within your customer base. So you have to test it from the different sorts of customers that you have, including, hearing impaired, non-English speaking background, et cetera, because don't forget, people can also complain about complaints. And even though the individual issues in RG 271 are not matters that you must report to ASIC, if there is a wider issue, such as it's too difficult to access, that would be a matter that would be a reportable situation to ASIC. As you
if I may, so on that particular point, the practicality around it is, let's say, ask someone from your family who has no idea about insurance, or a friend, go on your website and make a complaint, or try. just do this test. I've done probably some 30, 40 tests around different organizations. And sometimes it took me like up to 5 minutes searching the site maps and doing the physical search for the word complaint. And I know what it's called, right? Like, it's not everybody knows the official name of what it's supposed to be, and just say if they can do this. And also often what people do, and I do not believe it's a good practice, is they provide it somewhere in some document in the PDF format on page, 10 of that document. And often it's for example, a privacy policy. It's up to you, but I believe the good practice would be to make it more prominent on your web page, in your emails, in your verbal communications, as Paul's saying. You have to be where your customers are. And I think one of the bigger provisions of the RG271, if you have social media presence, like channels that you own, you absolutely have to monitor those.
Thank you for that, Teddy. And there's a couple of points there. Even though ASIC have said that you don't have to report every small issue of non-compliance with RG271, don't forget, if your complaints process is difficult to find, is that honest, efficient, and fair? So are you in breach of that general obligation? So, you know, you kind of have to think, and don't forget, IDR is a fundamental right for customers. Yeah, and that's your starting point. You know, the ability, because don't forget, you as an organization's got all the power over a customer. And that's why IDR is there, to make sure that the actual decisions that you make are fair and they're independent. And that's the purpose of IDR, to actually make sure it's not just one person's view within your organization. So it's a fundamental right of anyone to be able to make a complaint. And sometimes organizations just need to change their thinking. You know, another way of looking at complaints is the voice of the customer talking to you. And every company I talk to, they said, oh, we want to hear from our customer. Well, here's your chance. So make it easy for them to talk to you. That's another way of thinking about this. There's certain information requirements that you have to get, which will meet some of ASIC's RG271. How do you capture that? How do you, is it painful? Keep going back to the customer all the time. Again, when we move into some of ASIC's more data requirements, you need to amend all of your privacy policy, or at least go and have a look at your privacy policy to ensure that it enables you to capture the actual data that ASIC expects you to capture. This is my number one bugbear. Multiple AFSL holders involved with that complaint. And with claims handling as a financial service, we're going to see much, much more of this. Now, don't forget, every single AFSL holder, whether you're a TPA, an underwriting agency, an insurer, doesn't matter. Everyone's got a general obligation at law to have an IDR system that meets the requirements of ASICs. That's in RG271, and one of those requirements is to manage a complaint within 30 days. If a complaint is made against you for the financial services that you provided, and you decide to hand it over to an insurer within 10 days, you can't absolve yourself from that complaint. What you've done now, and well done to you, you've now outsourced it to the insurer. And ASIC and RG271 are very clear around what outsourcing is for complaints. You can outsource responsibility, you can't outsource accountability. So you then have to monitor the insurer because it's still your complaint. That's a different thing if the complaint is 100% against the insurer, completely different thing. But that's what I'm talking about. Within those first couple of days, this is why handover doesn't make any sense, because you're now getting into outsourcing arrangements. It's much better before October the 5th, please. You know who your partners are. Sit down with them and work through practical case studies of what's likely to happen, and agree that if this scenario happens, you'll manage the complaint for us. It'll be one person, and here's the process. We may have an internal IDR team, but we all agree upon that. Yes, great. If the complaint's about this particular situation, then I'll handle it and I'll inform you, and how you then pass. So we've gone away from, you've obviously entered into a partnership with a company or companies because you've got, you know, good understanding. Complaint management from 5th of October is about genuine, true partnerships. It makes no sense to me that if I'm going to appoint you as my TPA, but I've got no faith in you then managing a complaint on my behalf. I don't understand the logic in that. And don't say, oh, Paul, come on, you're a consultant. Yeah, yes, I am. But so what's the logic from a customer's perspective that the TPA, we give you 10 days to manage the complaint. If you can't do it, you must give it over to us. Oh, that's a great customer experience, isn't it? So, but if the complaint is partly due to conduct of the TPA, plus a bit about the insurer, why shouldn't the insurer be comfortable with the TPA and have agreed up front that you manage the complaint and you keep us informed. So I don't get this warm handover business when there's multiple AFSLs involved, but you need to agree with each of your partners up front on here's the different situations of complaints that may arise, and here's how we will act for those, adopting a customer-centric approach, because the law doesn't recognise that one AFSL is of greater importance over another AFSL. So why is an insurer's AFSL more important than a TPA's AFSL? Now, I know what the insurer would say, and I've worked at insurers, and fair enough, maybe they do have more experience, etc. And then great, let the insurer manage all your complaints for you. So, but again, work out in the first, before 5th of October, who's going to be doing what, and how do you keep everyone informed? And that's this next bit about keeping everyone informed, overseeing the complaint, etc. Don't forget systemic issues. You should be getting a lot of data around incident management. Incidents is the voice of your employees and your partners talking to you about when things go wrong. Complaints, control testing, you get a lot of data. You need to be looking at that data and saying, do we have a wider issue here? And this is what AFCA do. AFCA looks at the complaint and says, could this impact other parties outside of this immediate complaint? If it is, that's a systemic issue, and AFCA will hand it over to their team who deals with these systemic issues. So if it's good enough for AFCA, it should be good enough for all of us. So you must look at every single complaint you get and say, is this complaint unique to this particular customer, or could it happen to other customers? If the answer could happen to other customers, it's a potential systemic issue and needs to be treated accordingly. And RG271 deals with systemic issues. And what we do know, the quicker that you can jump on a systemic issue, the less likelihood of harm to your company, to your customers, and to your people. So you do need to be able to have a system in place that identifies individual complaints to systemic issues.
And also, I guess the matter of the fact is, because the game's changing and a lot more is at stake for you to lose, is more about, do you have a person in your organization who's actually actively looking at this? And in addition to the requirements for systemic issues, ASIC's, for example, also asking for the workload. And because they've reduced the time frame to 30 days, they are going to be looking at the workload of your staff. And let's say Jane has 30 complaints and everyone else has only 2, then clearly there's a problem. So you do need somebody inside of your organization to actively manage the workload.
That's an excellent point. Again, you can't look at RG271 in isolation. As we know, one of your general obligations at law is to have adequate resources for your financial services. Adequate resourcing means people as well. So if you're getting a volume of complaints coming through and you do not have enough people to manage your complaints, that's actually also a reportable situation to ASIC under having adequate resources to provide your financial services. So you can't just think of one obligation. You've got to think about the impact across many. And indeed, in RG271, ASIC spends a lot of time talking about the people who are empowered, because what ASIC don't want to see happen is that someone who's dealing with the customer has got no authority to resolve the complaint. And then it's got to go up the line, you get this person who's got no understanding of the customer, whatever, having to make a call, and then goes to someone else and it just eats up the day. So you must make sure that the people who are managing your complaints, one, are adequate, so there's enough numbers and they've got the authority to be able to deal with the complaints. And for insurers, your IDR teams cannot have to refer to the head of claims anymore. That's all gone now. Your IDR team must have unfettered authority to be able to resolve a complaint without going to head of claims, for example, to get signed off. So Tatiana, I think we've covered off enough there, just keeping an eye on the time.
Yeah, so I think Paul, you also mentioned a lot of practicalities about people, but here just a very short top 5 issues that you need to keep in mind. And I think Paul spoke about some of them already, but I think, Paul, it just makes sense just to name them again and say, don't forget this, don't forget this, don't forget this.
Yes. Look, I think it's a really good point. Where I can guarantee that your IDR system will fall over is people. People are your best control and people are your worst control. But use people to your advantage so they are genuinely the eyes and ears of your organization. So depending on your size, and ASIC does recognize that your IDR system is a factor of the nature, scale, and complexity of the business. So if you don't get many complaints and have a single dedicated resource to manage the complaints, if you get volumes, then you may have 2 or 3, but you need the people who receive the complaints in your organization must be experienced people to be able to identify from a triage point of view of that first action that needs to be taken. You do need, as we talked before, you do need to educate and train your frontline staff, because complaints don't come up with a big sign that's flashing on and off. I'm a complaint, I'm a complaint, I'm a complaint. And what we're asking our frontline people to do, it's become an industry in of itself. So we can't have backpackers there anymore. You know, not that there's many backpackers around these days. They need to be trained contact center people, because they have to identify vulnerable customers. They have to identify complaints. They have to identify incidents. These people need to be attuned and be really highly specialized. It is a highly specialized skill set. So you need to train your frontline staff. You need to know what the definition of a complaint is. And again, especially around the social media, ASIC have narrowed that for us, thank goodness, where it's any social media owned or controlled by you or an authorized representative, they are you still, where the author of the post is both identifiable and contactable. And ASIC specifically say it's not third-party sites. So Facebook's out, LinkedIn's out, et cetera, but any social media that you control or owned, or your authorized reps control or owned, if someone makes a complaint on that social media and the person can be both contactable and identifiable, day one has just commenced. And if you haven't got someone monitoring your social media, or your authorized reps aren't monitoring their social media, then day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and all of a sudden now the customer's complaining about the complaints. And now that is now a reportable situation to ASIC. Other staff, there's a lot of support staff behind the scenes, you know, people who have got authority, whatever, IT people, governance people, in-house legal people, who may be asked to play part of a role in the complaints process. They need to be trained on knowing of how important this is and how quickly they must respond or get information, etc. So you need to train other staff as well as your frontline staff. And finally, the big one, in working through the different case studies, etc., when there's multiple partners involved, multiple AFSL holders involved, is how are you going to manage these complaints? How are you going to pass information back and forward? And how are you going to make it the least onerous from a customer experience perspective? And as I said, I don't think these warm handovers are going to work. I could be wrong, but I don't think they're going to work. But it'll be interesting to see from a customer. I want to speak to a customer. I don't want to speak to someone from the insurance industry where they'll tell me, oh, it works fantastic. I want to actually speak to the customers and get their experience, say, after 3 or 4 months. So that's, I think, what you need to do to get your people all set by October the 5th.
Thanks, Paul. I think kind of my overlay of this as a practitioner, the warm handovers and the multiple parties and so on, to me seems like one of the biggest challenges and the game changers in that's going to be very, very different for everyone involved. So I will tell you a little bit now about so there's clearly a case for technology here, even though we did not pay specific attention to it, and we focus a lot of our efforts in people, because as Paul said, you're gonna make it or break it because you have people either leading or rejecting certain things. However, nonetheless, compliance in itself is quite an easy process to automate and quite an easy process to support an entire organization and the whole process in a very proactive way. So as I mentioned earlier, being very, very passionate about technology, insurance, and now slowly compliance, never thought I'd say that. I built a very, very simple and intuitive technology solution that is based on the principle of collaboration and out of box. And when I say out of box, what I mean is, in the beginning of our conversation, we spoke about the 3 pillars that make you successful. Pillar number 1 is understanding. So the technology that I've built understands the code of practice and RG 271. And when I say that, I mean it's repopulated with all data fields you need to be asking for. It tells you what the timelines that you need to observe. It tells you roughly who's in charge of what and how much time you've got. The one key differentiator, I think, based on what I know from Australian market and technology providers, everyone's being very onerous about their own stuff, right? And that's defeating the purpose. Because as the game changer right now, what's going to happen is the better we collaborate. So let's say one complaint involves 2 or 3 AFSL holders. The better we collaborate and the better we can see the same thing and operate on the same thing and don't need to spend hours of downloading Excel spreadsheets and emails and sending it to another party for a handoff, the more efficient we're going to get. So in my view, the only way to get to an effective process is a collaboration in the same space. So that's definitely what Curium can do. And the last part is no one knows your business process better than you. You basically can configure it the way you want to do it. And there's no code, no nothing about it. There's no cost upfront. It's by far the most affordable solution in the market. It has some hardcore information security protection because you're handling sensitive information. It's very, very easy to use. As Paul was saying, everything about the customer should come first. And that's the principle that I've used in building anything. So basically, before writing the first line of code, I had some 10, wireframe tests with real people who use that. If you want to know more about either the technology, or if you want to get some specific questions to Paul, now it's time. And also, we do have some time for questions. And to be very honest with you, I did receive a few questions in advance. So I'll ask Paul kindly to respond to those. And a lot of these questions that people are asking, they're very specific to their situation, but maybe it's also a good way for you to see how different interpretation of the code, the RG271, and the different players in the industry can be. So Paul, if that's all right, I'll skip the tips for a moment because I think we've spoken about most of them, and I'll come straight to questions. So question number 1 I've received from somebody saying, if a client is complaining about the claim decision but not providing any evidence to support their point, and the problem about it is, of course, the 30-day period, right? Because the client can complain and then not come back to me for another month. So question is, can I record the complaint only when they provide evidence? Can I wait and wait for them to provide the evidence first and then I record it?
No, the answer is no, you can't. So day 1 starts when you receive the complaint. And there's very, very, very limited circumstances only when you can extend the 30 days. And then there's some strict requirements around that as well. So for instance, if the customers come back with some new information, then you have to send them off for a medical examination, for example. and you can't organise that medical examination until, say, day 45. That's one of the few reasons when you can extend it. Other than that, don't forget, this isn't a court of law. So if the customer is not happy with your claim outcome and they gave you the evidence to start with to help their claim, and they don't have to give you any more evidence. It's got to go through your IDR process, say, has the right decision been made? So don't use your 30-day period to get more evidence. That's not the point, unless the customer's got something that you haven't got. So you need to give the customer the option to say, is there something that we haven't got that you would like to tell us about, or whatever. Other than you just go on the facts you've got. But you always make it easy. So it's not, you aren't running a court here. You know, don't forget, the point of IDR is to make sure that the actual decision that you made was the right one. And if it wasn't, then you overturn it and then make the actual right decision. But the answer is no, you don't wait. You have to record it once you receive the complaint from the customer.
So I've got another question on the chat. And so question is automation an option? And if so, what can be automated to improve customer experience, overall staff efficiencies, especially to improve customer outcomes? So you can automate quite a lot of things. You can allow your customers to lodge a complaint directly if they want to. You can automate that. You can just give them a button and say, tell me if you don't like something. You can automate all kinds of notifications and leading. You can let the system help you through the process. You can automate alerts. I think that's one of the actually bigger issues. Let's say you want to set yourself an alert to look at the complaint after 3 days that it's been with you, if there's been any action, and if it hasn't, you can automate the alert and say, please look at it. You still have 2 days to actually resolve it in the best terms and the best customer experience possible. You can automate all kinds of notifications because, as you all know, working with different partners, probably 70% of your time, what you do is you send emails to each other, informing each other about things that you do. That's definitely a clear case for automation. If there is a notification of a new complaint coming in or a new document or a new kind of development, that's an easy one to do. For the customer, I think the one, as you know, again, especially in claims, it can be up to some 10 parties that are all dealing with one customer on one claim. And so a single interface / voice would be a great customer experience. And also, as you'll see in the questions here, a lot of the times people will get very confused because, you know, if you've got your party 1, party 2, party 3, a restorer, a builder, a claims officer, an insurer, and a broker, all talking to the customers, at some point the customer will just speak to somebody and not necessarily complain about them, but just complain about the overall frustration. So it's very, very important to have like a central funnel or channel, what to do in this situation, who's gonna talk to it. You can't automate the communication, but you can automate all the supporting elements of that. We have another question. My CRM is not working great. It's a question about the solution. I can answer that one privately. Paul, if that's all right, let's come back maybe to the questions here for a second and see that there are a few scenarios here that play through for different players. So we've got like, it's a quite a frequent question, and we refer to it a few times. What if my insurer, and I'm a TPA that, for example, run claims on their behalf, requires me to move every complaint to them after 15 days? Yeah. What can I do if the complaint is actually against my organization and I want to keep an eye on it?
Yeah, and look, that happens all the time, and I can understand why. You know, it's very easy for me to sit back here and don't allow them to do that. But at the end of the day, you actually want to be appointed by them, so you're going to say yes, that's fine. But you get the agreement up front. So for instance, if you say that the complaint is solely against me and I've got an AFSL, then I'll manage those complaints myself. If the complaint is solely against the insurer, then I'll pass it to you straight away. It's a ones in between where it could be partly the TPA and partly the insurer who may be the issues that contributed to the complaint. If you haven't been able to resolve the complaint within 15 days and you pass it to the insurer, that's still an unresolved complaint for you. And therefore, that means that that is still, you still have to monitor and oversight that as well. So it's very clear that you need to then to agree with the insurer how you do that. Now, I think David just put up a question.
You put up a question if it's confirmed that the 30 days actually start from the day after, not the same day as complaint has been lodged. So it's 31.
I see. Yeah, I look. That's probably, you know, I think taking a highly technical bit, that do you start it from you know, if it's received at 8:15, then it's 30 days from 8:15. I haven't seen that anywhere yet. I would, if ASIC have said that in an advocate forum, then ASIC aren't going to come out and say something that's not true. So, but again, don't forget, ASIC, this is the interesting thing. Now, where you've got the benefit here is that it actually is an enforceable paragraph. But at the end of the day, ASIC don't set the law. That's up to the courts to actually be a final arbiter here. So I would certainly be wanting to get something in writing from ASIC, and ASIC have been wonderful lately. I don't doubt that they'll put something out in due course. I haven't seen anything yet. I would certainly still act as if day one is the date you get the complaint until such time that we get something from ASIC, which clarifies that 30 days. I do know a couple of people. I might give them a phone call, but yeah, I would say until you see something in writing, I would still act as if day one. Yeah, so but don't get it's day one for everyone. So again, from a customer, the customer would see that the TPA, for example, is acting on behalf of the insurer. And therefore, if I gave notice to the TPA, then I assume I've given notice to the insurer. So it is day one for everyone. Yeah, whether that's on the actual date or the day after.
I think we'll take time for one more question and then we'll wrap up. So what if somebody or I get a complaint about something that's not at all about my business whatsoever? They complain about something else, but I just get it.
And look, I think this is a good one. And again, this isn't compliance advice. This is being an advocate for the insurance industry. I think we all owe an obligation to the industry that we're part of, and we help form customers' view of our industry. So even if I got a complaint because someone heard that I may be doing a bit of work for whatever, I may be that only person who allows, who gives my ears to that customer. So I would take the time before I start judging or think about RG to someone who's, just tell me, just talk to me and really understand what it is that's caused the angst for them or that's gone wrong. And as I get more information, then one, I would certainly validate that after they spoke to me. Okay, so you haven't got a complaint against me. No, I don't. I just don't know who to contact. Right. Thank you for what you've told me. I would then go speak to the TPA, the insurer, or whoever. I tell the customer, I will give you a call back within a day to tell you what's going on. I then speak to the insurer or whoever, get agreement from them that they'll contact the customer, then give the customer a call back myself and say, I've spoken to XYZ and they're going to give you a call within the next 24 hours. If you don't hear from them, please give me a call back. So there's some times that we need to be, we kind of need to put the insurance industry above our own obligations. And you may be the only person that is being that is allowing that customer's voice to be heard, and you understand the jargon and stuff. So even though it doesn't relate all to you, don't just say, oh, thank God, escape that one. Sorry, can't help you. No, help the customer, be an advocate for our industry. And if you have to make an extra phone call, so what? You know,
I think in the eyes of the law, just to confirm, you are obligated to record it. That's the, you can't brush it off.
Well, yeah, I'd be very careful, just make sure it's not against you. I would put it down because they've come to you, so therefore they think something. But yeah, so there's going to be very few cases, I think, when someone makes a complaint to you and they don't think that you're involved. So I would always act as if the complaint is being made against me until I had the hard facts to support otherwise. I think that's probably the best advice I can give there. Not that I'm giving advice, but.
All right. Thanks, Paul. We do have a few questions, but I think we're running out of time to address those. I hope it was helpful. So what we're going to share after that, I just got a question. If we could share a recording. Yes, we could share a recording. We could share the ASIC dictionary, as we said, data dictionary, just to make sure it's not obligatory yet, but ASIC is dangling the carrot that it's going to be. And we can share these slides with you just to have all the checklists and things that you need to know. Thank you very much for taking the time. I hope you either had your lunch or you're going to have it just right now. If you want to keep on chatting about any of the topics that we raised today or any additional things, please reach out to Paul and myself. And thank you for everything. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tatiana.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Tatiana.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
And Michael.
Bye.